I need some traction.
Hey everyone, Lloyd Lobo here, co-founder at Boast AI and Traction. Today's Traction webinar is brought to you by Boast AI and Launch Academy in partnership with Growth Lasers. As you're joining, please introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us your name, the company you're from, and where you're tuning in from. I'm tuning in from Dubai for the next few weeks, and our awesome speaker here is tuning in from, where are you tuning in from, Auren?
I'm tuning in from the DC area in Virginia.
Awesome, fantastic. I have a lot of friends and family there in the DC area.
Amazing.
And folks, if you have any questions, type them in the Q&A or type them in the chat. We'll take them as we go along, or if they're relevant to the discussion, or we'll take them at the end. So let's get started. So fundraising, as you all know, is not a natural talent for most of us. It's easy to make mistakes and judgment along the way. And so instead of relying on traditional best practice, there are some non-obvious insights that can bring you a lot of learning and set you up for success. And our awesome speaker here, Auren Hoffman, he's a former CEO and co-founder of LiveRamp, which went public. He's now building SafeGraph, which just closed a $45 million Series B. And Auren's a serial entrepreneur, founded and sold 3 internet companies before he was 30. BridgePath, Kyber Systems, and GetRelevant. And he's also an active angel investor and advisor in over 100 companies. Wow, how do you even keep tabs? 100 companies, that's a lot of angel investing to do there. So without further ado, let's get the show on the road. Auren, welcome to Traction. You've been a serial entrepreneur, just raised a Series B, took a company public, a lot of learnings here. A very, very successful career as an entrepreneur and an investor. Give us your backstory. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so there's a bit of always being in the right place at the right time. So happened to be in the at Berkeley in the 90s. That was right when the internet was coming around. I was an engineer, still am an engineer. And so, part of success is always making sure you're in the right place at the right time.
A lot of entrepreneurs get their start as engineers. Like it's like a sort of, I guess, proven thing. Be an engineer and then go start a company. Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur out of engineering, or how did that come about?
I did know I had to put my way through college, so I had a business in high school that was able to get enough money that I could pay for my pay for college. And so even kind of back in high school kind of days, I had an inkling that that working as an entrepreneur might be more fun.
Definitely. So I want to get into the investing side of things before we get into raising the Series B and building a unicorn. When you invest, right, you've done 100 deals now over the years. How do you know when a startup can become a billion-dollar business? You've seen so many of them.
Well, you certainly have no idea. You don't know. And so really what you're trying to do is you're trying to de-risk yourself a bit. So, let's say you're investing at a $100 million valuation, which would be a relative, pretty high valuation to invest at. To get a 10x, you need that company to sell for probably roughly $2 billion, right? With dilution and stuff. So, if you can, if you have a better than 10% chance of getting a 10x, well, that's a start. If you can get to maybe a 20% chance of getting a 10x, well, that's incredible. And so, but you have to assume that quite a few of the things that you're going to invest in are going to go to zero, or are going to, return a very, very low return for your investment. And so that does mean you have to make a fair number of investments. If you make only 3 investments, even if you're an amazing investor, there's a good chance they all might go to zero. So you have to be somewhat diversified in your investment to have a chance of making a decent return.
And then when you talk to founders, what do you specifically look for? Maybe a few traits or something that says, okay, you know what, I want to invest and work with these people. Because I guess at the early stages, like you're talking about in the deals you're doing, it's probably all about the founder, or more about the founders than the idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've now invested over 200 companies. And so one of the things I did is actually did the opposite, which is I took a look at like all the companies that didn't do well. And try to understand like what were some what were some commonalities on the things that didn't do well. It's actually quite hard to do the opposite, because all these companies are somewhat successful in their own unique way. One of the few things I could find in the companies that didn't do well is that there was a high correlation of founders being very cool. They were cool. They looked cool. They dressed cool. They went out to cool parties. They did cool things. That's usually not a good sign for being a founder. So the founders that are a little bit less cool, they're often doing it more for the right reason. And the number one trait of a company that's going to founder that's going to return your money is somebody who just keeps doing it and doesn't stop. And a lot of times, like the kind of cool, quote unquote, cool founders, they just quit when things get hard. Of course, if things are great, no problem. And some of those had massive success, but there are founders that you put money in and they will never, ever, ever quit. They're going to return your money. They're going to figure it out. They're going to make it happen. And some of the best companies I've ever invested in are companies that had really rocky starts, but somehow still had a fantastic finish.
And is there an ideal profile to the number of founders or mix of founders skill sets that you look for typically?
What do you mean?
Like maybe, one founder has a strong engineering background, another founder has a strong go-to-market background. Some people say don't invest in solo founders. Some people say 4 is too many. Any theses around that?
I mean, I certainly don't have any hard and fast rules. There could be. I haven't done enough analysis to have a hard and fast rule. One of the things is it is hard to have hard and fast rules about what not to do or what to do, because there's always these exceptions that break all the rules. You could say you don't want to invest in, a team of founders that are married to one another, but then there are actually quite a few successes of teams of founders that are married to one another, right? So you could just come up with a lot of different rules, and often they're broken. So each investment is somewhat of a snowflake. The other nice thing is an investor is you want to invest in things that you have a proprietary advantage in. So obviously, of course, the founder needs to have a proprietary advantage in what they're doing. But if you don't have an advantage in that particular topic, I think it is very, very difficult. Investing is extremely competitive. So if you are getting into a deal, then why are you getting this deal, right? Why are you getting it above somebody else? And so you have to presume a lot of other really smart people have looked at the deal and decided not to do the deal, at least not to do the deal at that price. And so you have to have some sort of real reason about why you think this is going to be a really great company that other people don't see.
Definitely. I mean, a learning experience for me too. I mean, for the longest time, I was a bootstrap founder making no money. And then we raised a Series A, and then I started getting a salary. So I did a lot of angel investing in the last year, purely through our traction community, deals coming through and seeing other investors put in them. And that gave me access to some good
Cool.
founders as well. So still learning along the way. So fundraising, right? I mean, there's a lot of playbooks around Series A. There's a lot of playbooks around seed, but there's not many playbooks around the Series B. So let's talk through that. You have 10 most non-obvious rules to raising a Series B. What are they? Tell us all about it.
Well, I think the first thing is that it's going to be really, really hard, regardless of what you read in the press. Like, raising money is a freaking a lot of work. And really much of that work falls on the CEO, maybe one other person in the company. In fact, you should try to make sure it doesn't fall on anyone else on the company, because you still need the company to perform while you're out there raising money and while you're preparing to raise money. And that is a all-consuming thing, preparing and raising money. And it's going to take you as the CEO often out of the business for a couple of quarters. So you want to limit as much damage as possible and really focus on just having a small number of people, maybe you and one other person, maybe a finance person or something like that, that's out there. So I think the number one thing just to remember is it's freaking hard, and it's just a ton of work and a ton of hours, and you got to put those hours in. A lot of people think about the fundraise as like when you start pitching. I think that is really that's like the 10% left to do fundraise. Once you start pitching, everything comes, the 90% comes before you start pitching. And that's the most important thing, is really starting that fundraise like before you start pitching. So you really want to, and I know we're waiting for Lloyd as he's coming back on his video. So I'm gonna ad lib a little bit here while he's coming back. A couple of other things to start thinking about is like your pitch gets better over time. So I would start pitching the worst companies, the worst VCs first, and then pitch some of the better VCs later. When we did our financing at SafeGraph, we decided we were going to start pitching in January of 2011. And it took, for the first 3 weeks of pitches, we did terribly. Literally nobody we pitched in the first 3 weeks was interested in us. We got no term sheets. And then in the next 3 weeks, it just started going super, super well. And then we were able to pick a term sheet by the end of that 3 week period. So really saving like the better ones for last is important as well.
Now, I like that. You got to kiss 1,000 frogs. So let's kiss the ugliest ones first. But like your pitch gets better, right? Because every VC you pitch more or less asks very similar questions, and you refine it. But at what point do you know it's crystallizing and now I'm going to go full speed on it?
Well, you don't. I mean, you start to get, and one thing we did is we should have done better is we did about 10 practice pitches before we started pitching. And in retrospect, maybe we should have done 30 practice pitches. Real practice pitches with different people. We're giving you different feedback on it. And it's so awkward to do a practice pitch. You're pitching somebody, but you're not really pitching them because you know it's not real. It's like this weird fake thing, but you got to do it. It's really, really important. We should have done way more practice pitches because getting things to gel. And again, so much of that work comes before you're starting pitching. So do you have a data room? Is the data room really good? Is it easily accessible? How do you have, is the email down? Are you clearly defining what you do in like a 3 or 4 sentence email? Really getting the deck down, getting the whole story, making that story make sense with one another, being clear about what you do. A lot of times people will do a pitch and like 10 minutes into the pitch, you still have no idea what this company does, right? They're like giving you this big macro thing or something like you really want people to understand what that is. And then the other thing in a pitch, and this is both if you're pitching and also if you're on the other side of the pitch, you want this other person to be learning something and really engaged. So if the person you're pitching to is like learning something along the way, they're going to get it. They're going to be excited. If you're telling them things they already know, or they're not learning something within 1 or 2 minutes into the pitch, they're going to tune off. And on Zoom, it's so easy. It's easy to do a lot of pitches, but it's really easy to tune off too. They're going to open up their Twitter window. They're going to start doing some other stuff, and they're just going to not be listening to you.
Definitely. No, that's, and you can see it in their facial signals if they're engaged or not, if they're leaning in or they're sinking in their chair, even on Zoom, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but you want to make sure they're really engaged. And the only way to be really engaged is if they're learning something. That's what they're there to do. At the very least, these investors are learning machines. They want to be learning something. Their time is extremely valuable. So you have to be helping them learn something. And hopefully also that helps them understand why your company is interesting as well.
Definitely.
The other thing is basically is also figuring out who you're going to pitch to, because most investors aren't going to like your story. So figure that out ahead of time. No sense of wasting your time and wasting their time with pitching to people that are ultimately like, they're never going to get over the line. So, and that could be not only understanding which firms to pitch you, but literally figuring out which human at that firm you are going to talk to. What is the human that is most likely to get your company? And then ultimately, if you're looking for someone to join your board, is most likely to add value to it as well.
So that research actually starts a lot before you want to raise, right? So when is the time to raise, and when should you start thinking about it in your perspective?
Well, first of all, hopefully you don't have to, hopefully you're raising well before you have to raise, because you want to have some flexibility about when you want to go. Then I would say a quarter before you're going to raise. So we decided, okay, we decided we're going to raise in January 2021. So by starting a quarter before, let's say, October 1st, 2020, we're in full fundraising mode. We're making the deck. We're figuring out who we're going to pitch to. We're creating the data room. It takes a long time. It can easily take 3 months to get everything really, really prepped on the way. At the same time, you don't want to be married to that January 1st date. Let's say you have a bad quarter. Let's say your Q4 is really, really bad. You might want to push us out 1 quarter or even 2 quarters. And we ended up in October 2020, we had a really bad month. Then in November 2020, we actually had not a great month either. Then in December 2020, we just had this like amazing month, and our whole quarter looked really, really good. So we're like, okay, great, we're good to go on January. We're gonna start fundraising. If we had a mediocre December, we would have pushed the fundraise a few months, because you also want to be fundraising off of a time that you actually did pretty well.
Definitely. Now, how did you build that list of investors that you wanted to get in touch with? And how did you get access to them? I mean, you're a serial entrepreneur, so I would think you had no problems. But let's say you're a first-time entrepreneur. What are some tips for building that list and getting access to them? Well, a lot of people say, I'll take cold emails, but nobody does, right?
Actually, I think everyone does.
Okay.
Yeah, I think cold emails are the way to go. I don't think you should try to get warm intros. You should just cold email in. If you don't know how to write a cold email, you're probably not someone that you should raise money from, So I think cold emails are extremely effective. I think every single good investor reads them. They will read your cold email. They may not reply. If they don't reply, it's because they're not interested or you didn't do something to get them interested in the email. So of course your email has to be short. It should be very, very, very short. It should be very descriptive. It should be very clear about what you do. So they should be able to grok it. You should only send cold emails to people you are pretty confident are going to find it interesting. So you could write a custom cold. You don't have to send a drip to 1,000 people. You're sending a very custom message to a small number of people who are like, okay, I think you're going to be interested because of this. You invested in this company. You did this thing. Here's why, or this is for this, or we're like this, or here's, and make sure that the cold email is very, very targeted to them. They will reply if it's right for them.
Definitely. Now, one thing you said, which is, I think, non-obvious, most people say VCs ignore cold emails or your chances are lower. You should always go for a warm intro. My mentor, like Jason Lemkin, says he loves cold emails. He did 2 unicorns off of a cold email, and they were like, here's what I do. Here's my revenue. Here's my growth rate. Here's my NRR. Yep. I read everything about you, and here's why I want to connect. But this is a non-obvious one, right? You said you shouldn't go for warm intros. Why is that? Why cold email over warm intros?
Because what is a warm intro anyway, right? Like usually it's a warm intro from someone that barely knows the VC or something, right? And they often barely know you. Like you're emailing somebody who like you have a weak tie to, and you're saying, hey, can you introduce me to somebody that they have a weak tie to? So it's just like double weak tie that's going in. Imagine it's like 0.1 times 0.1. You're just going to get a very small number that goes in. Now, if somebody has a super strong tie to an investor and they have a super strong tie to you, if they can vouch for you, they say, look, I've worked with this guy before. I worked with him in his last job. This guy is a killer. He's amazing. Love working with this person. And then they reach out and then the VC respects that person. Great. But I would say 90% of the time that people ask me to do an intro, it's like, I barely know them. So they're asking me to do an intro. I don't know them. I can't even vouch for them that much. And then they're asking me to do an intro to someone that I barely know. So it's like, again, it's a double problem. Just send the email direct. It's going to be much more performative.
So they're basically asking you to do their cold email anyway. So they may as well send it directly to the person.
Send an email. Exactly.
So when you were raising for SafeGraph, how did you determine the right fit of investors for you, that list that you come up with? And then how did you build relationships with them beforehand, before going in the process?
So I don't think you should build relationships with investors before you raise. I think it's
is another non-obvious one.
Yeah, that's a huge waste of time. That you're a CEO, your job is to run your company, and you want to spend as little time as possible like building relationships with investors. and spend as little time as possible raising money. You want to make a great company. And meeting with most investors is massive waste of time. Unless you're confident in that meeting, they're going to give you value that's going to be helpful for you. If you're just going to build a relationship, then again, like if you're going to build a strong relationship, like this person's going to become your best friend. You're going to hang out with them every week. Yeah, those relationships go a really long way. But usually what happens when we're talking about building a relationship is like you meet with somebody once every 2 years, you grab coffee for 30 minutes, maybe you have a Zoom call. That's not a relationship. That's just like, that's a transaction with someone you barely know. And I don't think they're going to, and I don't think it's going to be that helpful. In fact, I think it's only going to be hurtful, because the way most humans work is they think of you the first time they met you. So whatever impression you give someone the first time you meet them, they will think of that from you for the rest of your life. Just go back to think of like your best friend when you're 12 years old. If you run into his mom right now or her mom right now in like the supermarket, she's going to think you're still 12 years old. She will literally cannot comprehend that you're an adult person anymore. Like she's going to think you still like the same exact Star Wars action figures you liked then, and the same, and the same cupcakes that you liked, etc. Like it's just really hard for people to grow as you grow. And so if you meet an investor right when your company is going or whatever, things aren't going to work that well, or you don't have the pitch down, or you haven't really, they're just going to think of you that way. When you talk to an investor, you're in sale mode. You want to have everything down. You want them to be blown away by what you're bringing in, not just kind of a casual, hey, what's going on? Let's talk about avocado toast or something. Like, no, we want to be boom selling, and we want to make sure that they're just completely blown away by what you're offering.
Now, as you were raising your Series B for SafeGraph, how did you determine who would be the right fit? Because there's a swarm of investors now, lots of capital came into the market, tigerization of capital to everyone is leveling up their game. How did you, with all the attention you're getting, how do you figure out, okay, these guys are the ones that I want to go and have conversation with? Because it's like you said, a founder's time should be focused on running the company. And if you have 30, 40, 50 investors in the mix, that could be a very stressful process as well, right?
Totally. And you're going to have 30 or 40, right? That's not uncommon to have that many. You probably don't want to have like 400, but it's not uncommon, especially if you're raising like a Series B, to be talking to 30 or 40 investors. So I think a simple thing is just looking at what the track record of these investors. So either what other companies that they have invested in, or what did they do before they were some of them before they were investor were an entrepreneur, or maybe even they're currently an entrepreneur running a company, or they're doing they're a founder or something like that, or they're a CEO. So is this the type of person that's going to give me good feedback for my company? And is this the type of person who's going to understand my company? And you can get that by often looking at someone's LinkedIn profile. You should have a pretty good understanding that they're, if you're a SaaS company and they're a biotech investor, you probably don't want to talk to them. If you're a SaaS company and they're mostly invest in B2C, you probably don't want to talk to them either. So, and they probably don't want to talk to you. So really try to find the folks that are going to be most likely to grok what your company is doing, but also most likely to also add value if they do. Once someone's on your cap table, you want to make sure that they're adding value. And there are people who add value. There's people who don't add any value, and there's people who add negative value. And you want to optimize for the first one and not for the other two.
Fantastic, certainly. Now, there's a lot being said on fundraise timing as well, right? Like some people say it's going to take a few months, few weeks. How should you think about time boxing this whole thing? Because I view it personally as a sales process, right? And if you drag things out and you leave lots of time between conversations, time kills all deals, or time kills all deals. And you talked about condensing your fundraise process to as short as possible, minimizing the time between the term sheet and the close, all of these things. So walk us through that. What should founders do to minimize that journey, or how should they think about that
the
journey?
first thing you need to do is do a ton of work and a ton of research before you start pitching. You don't want anyone to know that you're ready, you're fundraising. You want to be working completely on your pitch. You want to work on who you're going to pitch. You want to work on your data room. You want to get all that stuff done. You want to do all your practices, all your stuff done. When you're ready, then you want to come out, and you want to come out guns blazing, because you want to get a lot of people excited about the deal quickly, and you don't want a deal to look tired. You don't want to pitch somebody, because VCs talk to another. You don't want to pitch to somebody and then they heard you pitched another VC 2 or 3 months before that. So you've got to, once you start pitching, you have a limited window, which is another reason I think you shouldn't be building relationships with VCs, because every time you build a relationship with a VC, you're pitching. You might not think you're pitching, but you are pitching, and now you have a tired deal that could be 6, 12 months tired or something by that point. So you should be doing everything possible to really condense it down. And so the first thing you want to condense down is that first pitch to accepting a term sheet. You want to condense it down as fast as possible, and so you want to let people know you've got a process. You want to make sure that they're moving on the process. You want to kick people out of the process. So if you're meeting with somebody and they can't get back to you if you want to meeting with a VC and they can't get back to you within a few days, you should just kick them out of the process. You should say, hey, you should write them a very polite email. It was great meeting with you. I really admire you, but you're not moving at the pace that I expect a partner of mine to move at, because I'm looking for a long-term partner who's going to be very, very responsive and move quickly. So I'm disinviting you from the rest of the process, just to let you know, in a very polite way. You don't have to be mean about it, but you shouldn't suffer somebody that isn't going to play on your timeline. Everybody who you should be talking to, you want to make sure you're super excited. And if they're slow rolling you, if they're moving, they're just going to be a bad long-term partner in general. That's probably part of their personality. Is there somebody who, if they're not someone who likes to respond to emails and get back to you, you probably don't want this person on your board. So you really want someone who's super responsive. Then, okay, now you're getting to the term sheet stage. You may have a competitive process. It may not be that competitive. At some point, you're going to pick a term sheet. You want to do everything possible to go from term sheet to close very, very, very quickly. So first of all, I would look at a couple different terms in the term sheet. The first one is how long the exclusivity period is from term sheet to close. Usually exclusivity period is 30 days. If you ever see something beyond 30 days, I think this is a massive red flag. And I don't think there's any reason to let that happen. You mentioned Tiger, they're often closing like 10 to 15 days. So if a firm says, even if I need 30 days, you say, well, look, Tiger closes 10 to 15 days. Why do you need so long? Are you not as well? Are you not run as well as a firm as Tiger? Do you not? And so put that back on them. Like, other great VCs can close really fast. Sequoia can close super fast. Why can't you, VC, close fast? The second thing to look at is the legal fees. Usually there's a clause in a term sheet that says how much you need to reimburse someone else's legal fees. The higher that number is, the longer it will take you to close, because the first thing that your lawyer is going to do and the first thing that the firm's lawyer is going to do is look at that clause. Let's say the clause says $50K that you're going to be reimbursing. I guarantee you that at the end of the deal, you're going to get a bill from the investors council for, if it says $50K, for $49,900. And you're going to, they don't want to, just overbill their client. So what they're going to do is they're going to just like start nitpicking all of the little things that need to be nitpicked, all these things that have like 0.01% chance of happening. There's tons of these docs are hundreds of pages. There's tons of things to argue about if you really want to argue. For most investors, they shouldn't be arguing about those things. Those things will make no difference to their returns. It is just a big waste of time. And any investor, really worth their salt is really just going to focus on the very, very, very big things. And almost all those very big things should be in the term sheet. So after that, it should flow through really well. The other thing you can do to really, really make your term sheet to close shorter is make sure all of your data room is already done. So they shouldn't be asking you for anything you don't already have done. It should be very, very easy. It should be well designed. It should be easy to navigate. All the data should be there. So it's like, great, we already have all the due diligence. We have every employee contract. We have every customer contract. We have everything you need. Like, let's close, because they do need to look at a whole bunch of documents. That should be done by the time you sign the term sheet. You shouldn't have to wait like 3 weeks to get it to them.
Definitely. So now, what is then the ideal process, right? Is it 4 weeks? Is it 6 weeks? Like, how should you think about that time box? Or
I don't know that there's any ideal number, because it's going to be dependent on everybody, but they're like, you should be doing everything possible once you're pitching to make the close go as fast as possible. If you can go from pitch to close within a quarter, I think you are doing extremely well. And I think you should assume it goes at least a quarter from pitch to close. And then it should take you another quarter before that to actually get all the prep done for it. So you're talking at least a 2-quarter process before you have money in the bank. If you think it's going to happen faster than that, it could. And certainly we know people that have done it faster. But I think a good entrepreneur prepares for at least a 6-month full process. And then once they're pitching, let's say a 3-month process to get to have money in the bank.
awesome. Let's dive a little bit into the prep, right? One of the things you talked about is building that list of investors. And there's a lot of places you can research, like AngelList and Crunchbase. You can look at the partners' LinkedIn profiles. Like you said, you can see their backgrounds, what companies they've invested in. You can also talk to other founders they've invested in to see it's the right fit. But what are other artifacts and things you need as a part of your prep, and especially data room?
Well, the building the list is exactly what you said. I don't think there's any magic around that. I think the data room there isn't that much magic either. Like, you can ask your other people who are already investors, ask your lawyer, ask, what are they going to need to get it done? And then you have a data room with different gates on it, right? And so the first data room is like your deck. And then the next data room might have some high level financials. And the next data room has some things that are, maybe a little bit more proprietary. And maybe the next room after that is like everything that someone's going to need after they sign the term sheet or something, right? And so you've got a graduated room because people are doing diligence to get to the term sheet. And then, of course, like most of the stuff hopefully everything post the term sheet is just making sure that, like, you're not a fraud, and that you've got all your I's dotted and your T's crossed.
Definitely. So somebody asked here, can you provide a snapshot with file names of your ideal data room? Like, due diligence list is key, or maybe you can rat off. Maybe one is you talked about the deck. You talked about having your financials, which is your P&L. There are other things like probably your customer file broken by cohort.
All your obviously every single customer contract, every single contract you've ever signed, every single NDA you've ever signed is somewhere going to be filed somewhere in this ultimate data room, right? And so every employee contract you have, every options agreement, all the, whatever, if you're using Carta, all the backups from Carta, et cetera, they're all going to be somewhere ultimately in this room, because like some lawyer is going to go through all this stuff and make sure you have it. And then you don't want them to find out, well, you have everything for 90% of your employees, but for 10% of employees, there's these things that are missing. You want to know all that stuff ahead of time. And again, all these things you can get from your lawyer or from anybody else that you get the list ahead of time, and you should know all this stuff well before you're raising money.
Definitely. Now, in terms of things in the data room that trip people up the most, has there anything been or missing in your data room, or founders you've talked to or advised that was not in the data room that tripped them up?
Like what?
Like, I don't know, maybe a certain artifact, or maybe things not presented the right way. I know, like in the past, that I've advised some founders where their customer file is all messed up, right? In terms of like the data and how it flows through cohort analysis to show if they're growing or shrinking.
Do a good cohort analysis. If you're a SaaS company, do a good cohort analysis. Like, don't rely on the don't rely on the VC to have to go do that. you should be able to put a very, very decent financial model. It doesn't have to be amazing, but a decent cohort analysis, understand your churn, understand your, obviously understand like your bookings and how that flows in. All the basic stuff that I'm kind of talking a SaaS book now, but if you're a SaaS company, all the basic stuff that any SaaS investor is going to want to know, you do that. Again, we're talking, this is like for Series B here. Series B, you're going to be a pretty sizable company, right? You're probably going to be, at the minimum 5 million ARR or something. You have some things that are going, you have some finance function somewhere. Maybe it's just like one gal somewhere, but you've got one finance or one guy somewhere doing something. But you've got something already going to make these things happen.
Certainly. Now, in terms of the fundraise process, right? You talked about it almost being like being like a sales funnel. You talk to a lot of people in the beginning, and then as weeks progress, you have your data room that's gated. How do you figure who to progress from one phase to another? And how do you even tell them that, hey, you're not in the race anymore and I'm not giving you access to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a sales process, and it's definitely looks like sales. So you have to qualify them as much as they're qualifying you. You have to make sure that, and so first of all, are you talking to a partner who can make a decision, or are you talking to more of an associate who doesn't have, again, if you're in a sales process, you're always trying to figure out, do they have budget? Do they have authority? Right. So who is this person? How's the decisions getting made, et cetera? You may know that coming in, you might not know that, but you need to qualify them. They should be selling you as much as you're selling them, because they know if this is competitive, they need to sell you. So they're going to be out there selling relatively early. Investing is an incredibly competitive sport because they're selling a very undifferentiated product to you, right? When you're a company selling a product, you're selling something that's usually extremely unique. You're selling something that only you have, this like amazing software tool that you have created. When you're an investor, you're selling money. You're selling something incredibly common, and you're basically selling a commodity that everybody has. There's very little that's differentiated that an investor can have. So they're trying to figure out every little thing up front to show you how they're going to add value, how it's at least a little bit more than money, to show the differentiation. And so let them sell you as well. If they're not selling you, it's probably a sign that they're not interested. Right. There's lots of signs that people aren't interested. If people aren't getting back to you quickly, they're probably not interested. If they're calling you at like 11 p.m. and like demanding to have a meeting with you, that's a good sign that they are interested. And any good investor is going to be doing that. And by the way, like, don't hesitate. If you want to have a meeting with an investor at 11 p.m., do it. Like they'll do it. Like they'll be excited to go meet you. If they, it's like great. They put their kids to bed and then they're ready to get on the phone with you. Like that's great. That shows that they're interested in you.
Definitely. Now, tactics to drive FOMO. What have you seen work? Right, FOMO meaning like to expedite the term sheet or get people interested, because things could stretch on longer and you want to focus on building your company.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that like there are any core tactics. I think the most important thing is like, do you have product market fit with this investor, right? So is this investor the right person for you? Do they understand what you're doing clearly? Are they going to be adding value to you as well? Do you think this is a good person who is ethical? Who you're going to want on your board, et cetera. So I don't know that I don't know that you have to like create some sort of crazy process or get into someone's like core psychology. They're looking for good investments. They get paid to make good investments. They have to put money into work. They're spending a lot of time. They want it to work. Like if someone's on the phone talking to you, they would be excited. They wish they could invest in everybody they talk to. Unfortunately, they have to talk to 100 companies to invest in one. And they wish the ratio was higher too. Just like when you're on sales calls, you probably wish the ratio was higher.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Now, I want to go into the last few questions on fundraising and then dive into some ways to build a unicorn company that you've seen be most successful here. But valuations and price during term sheet, that's another hard one to figure out. The market is absolutely bonkers right now. How should founders think about valuations in this market? How do you figure out the price through the endless process?
I mean, I don't think you really do. You're going to get a few different term sheets. You're going to have some sort of sense of what other companies like you have traded at. They're going to have a sense of what other companies like you have traded at, and you're going to come up with a price, and it is what it is. And, if you feel that it's, what will happen sometimes is that sometimes VCs early in the process will give you a term sheet. And I think there's like two types of VCs. There's VCs who really want to get the deal done. And I remember when we bought a home, we really wanted to get this home done. We really wanted to get into the home. And so we overbid. We didn't want the home to go into market. And so we overbid for a home. We decided to throw in a number that we knew was probably higher than they were going to list it for, so that they don't go to market, so that they sell to us. There's another way to do it, though, which is you're trying to get a deal as a VC. So you're early in the process and you throw in a bid which you think is lower, and you're trying to basically win the deal, but you're also trying to get a good deal for yourself, right? And so sometimes you won't know one of the others, but in our case, we did have a VC that came in relatively early, very, very early in the process, and lobbed in a term sheet, which was kind of at the very, very low end of our valuation expectations. And we let them know that we didn't think that reached our value. That certainly wasn't enough to have us stop the process. If we ended up with that price, but that wasn't enough to have us stop the process. And they said, look, we respect what you're doing. And then they actually said, we're going to leave the process where it is, well, because we can't pay anymore. We said, okay, great. And so then later on, we ended up getting term sheets at a significantly higher valuation, like maybe 60% higher than what they put their term sheet in. And then at the very, very end of the process, they came back in with a term sheet that was even higher than we had. But at that point, we were already so far down with another firm, and we liked the other firm, and we thought the other firm was good. So we ended up choosing the other firm rather than the firm who came in early, who was trying to get a good deal. If they had just tried to win it fair and square, then they probably would have won it. But because they tried to win it with the best deal, then I think I think ultimately it didn't work for them. And when you guys are raising money, when everyone on this call is raising money, you may see lots of different flavors of VCs trying to do it in different ways. And you have to make that determination around price.
And a lot of those tactics also erode trust with the founder, right? If somebody's trying to swoop in with a term sheet early and lower price than your gut feel, but you're getting a sense of other things from others or something better, then you're going on this journey, building a relationship. And over that course, if somebody has lowballed you and then coming higher just to beat others or match others, then it's eroded the trust already, I feel, right?
I think you're right. And remember, you're married to this VC, especially if they're going to be on your board for a really long time. It could be over a decade that you're going to be married to this person. You want to have a real trusted relationship with them.
Certainly. Now, the pitch deck. What is the ideal sort of time frame for the pitch and the pitch deck? You're in this first meeting. Let's say you've cold emailed a bunch of people, like a funnel, right? You figured out a list of maybe 60, 70 VCs you want to reach out to. Maybe 10, 15 have said, okay, I'll take that first meeting. What should the ideal flow of that meeting go? Because some founders spend a lot of time just talking at the VC. And I've seen this with salespeople as well. And unfortunately, in my previous company, I was on a demo, and the demo, this is the funniest story I share. The CEO of the company was giving the demo, and he was on and on, not letting anyone get a word in. And then I get text messages throughout the call. I'm getting calls and text messages. I finally said, maybe it's an emergency. I pick it up, and he's like, guys, we got dropped from the meeting 20 minutes ago. So I'm like, who is the CEO pitching to? They had dropped 20 minutes
Hilarious.
ago. That's the funniest experience I've been. But I've seen founders do this. They pitch and pitch and pitch, and the VC on the other end is probably sinking in their chair. What is the ideal format? How long should the founder pace to talk to before opening it up to questions?
It's a good question, because I think sometimes when you're pitching different VCs, they're gonna have different personalities. Some of them want to hear the full pitch and then start diving in. Some are diving in with questions like immediately. So I think you should, your first call might be 30 minutes or something. So you should probably assume like you should be able to get through your whole pitch in, let's say, 15 minutes. So you can have some back and forth. And so you need to be able to craft the story, go through the pitch relatively quickly, maybe 20 minutes at the longest. And then really have time to dive in to start, and then be out there taking notes. And when I was pitching, I was always doing it with one other person at my company. So it was kind of like two of us who did everything. And so when I was pitching, he was taking a ton of notes. And then afterwards, we would sync up, and he said, look, we should change the pitch. We should do this differently. People didn't understand this. They're asking questions about this thing. We could have easily changed that. And so this pitch is a living document, and it's going to, even if you're doing 7 pitches a day, like, okay, that night at 10 p.m., you could be changing your pitch and practicing and getting ready for the next day.
Certainly. And what does the ideal communication look like? Because a lot of founders, they do the pitch, but then you got to keep it moving, right? And you can't just throw it on the VC to hopefully follow up with you. Maybe they forget.
You gotta, first of all, there's usually stuff right away. Like you're sending them a piece of the data room. It could just be the deck, or it could be some other type of thing that you're sending them. There may be some follow-up to do. And then you want to be able to keep these guys interested. So, in the middle of your process, you may have landed a huge customer. Let them know, hey, by the way, we just landed a big customer, or, you may have hired an amazing, talented engineer you were trying to get, or whatever it is. There's some momentum that's happening over these weeks, that there's hopefully lots of goodness that's happening. It's always good to let people know that this thing is happening, and kind of keep them moving. But just like you would manage any tight sales funnel, you have to manage your VCs. They're very, very busy people. Just because they're not getting back to you doesn't mean that they're not interested. It probably means they're not interested if they're not getting back to you, but it also just means they could have got super busy with another deal, or something else happened during that time.
And maybe some advice: go and talk to the best sales rep and ask them what their process to closing large deals consistently is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And a lot of this is, everything is sales, but closing a VC also is sales, where you have to send that follow-up email. Like Auren said, you have to share good news. You got to keep them moving from one phase to the other. If there's a lot of sort of dull between or ghosting between 2 calls, then it's likely not going to happen. Or if people are not responding for weeks on end, then there's no movement, right? There's no movement. Time kills all deals. What is the 1 or 2 things, if you had to go and raise again, you'd do different?
Well, in this case, I think I would just do a lot more practice up front. I would do way more practice, because there's nothing like doing it live to get your pitch better with when you're doing it for real. But I think there's a lot of things you can do on the practice side to get it better. And again, these practice sessions are so tedious, and I just hated doing it because they just didn't seem like they're actually out there. It's like you're a musician and you're practicing scales or something, but practicing scales turns out to be very, very, very important.
And who do you recommend pitching practice with? Other VCs who are not in your wheelhouse?
Could be, yeah. So it could be other VCs, founders, basically people that are, sophisticated people. Like maybe you've got a sophisticated parent, but in my case, I didn't. So I'm not going to be like trying it on my parents or something. But you want to be pitching a relatively sophisticated person who either has pitched these types of VCs before, or has been in the shoes of the people that you're pitching.
Definitely. Now, you've raised this large amount of money. What are the key steps you need to put in place to building a unicorn? You have a playbook.
Well, I don't have a playbook, but I think the number one thing that plagues smart people is that you just, as you get more successful, you just get more and more good opportunities that come at you. And so when you're really young and you're early in your career, you basically have mostly really bad opportunities, and every once in a while you have a good opportunity, and it's pretty easy to differentiate between the two. As you progress in your career, you're going to have tons of good opportunities coming at you. And you never want to take on a good opportunity as you progress in your career. You only want to choose to go after great opportunities. And so what happens is a lot of people in their career, and this is not just true for founders, it's true for tons of people in their career, they end up in a local maxima because they're just getting all these good opportunities coming at them. And so they jump on them because their brain is trained like early in their career where you see a good opportunity, you should do it. But once as you start progressing your career, you need to wait for the great opportunities. And the problem is the great opportunities are sometimes disguised as bad opportunities. And so it does take a lot more due diligence to figure it out. They come much rarer, et cetera. If you're doing a lot of good opportunities, you won't have the capacity to take on the great opportunity. And so I think this is the number one thing that like smart people do wrong. And you don't want to end up in that local maxima.
Definitely. How do you define a local maxima? And what is the framework for determining great versus good? But because everything looks like good, or a lot of things look like good, but this is an important piece of advice here, separating great from good.
Well, usually a lot of good opportunities have some sort of capped upside that you can quantify. So someone wants to like put you on the board of some company or something, and it will pay you some amount of money or whatever. Like it's like a SAR advisory thing or whatever. Like there's some sort of like, it's like pretty capped at something. It's going to take X amount of time. Seems like a cool thing to do. You're going to join the local nonprofit art board or something and meet some cool people, get invited to a party or something. Like there's a lot of like things that are like good opportunities. The upside is somewhat capped, right? And it might not take massive number of your hours, but it's going to take up something to do it. You really want to invest your time. You have a very, very limited amount of time in the best opportunities that you can do. And those opportunities probably have a high likelihood of not panning out because they're going to have high upside that are out there. But there's going to be something about them that's going to be like super exciting for you or super passionate, or you're not going to be able to stop thinking about it. It's not just like a cool thing to do on the side and make a little bit of money.
Yeah, definitely. So large TAM, probably large upside is one way to look at it. Or from a product framework perspective, like, on the product side, we use the RICE framework, which is how many people it's going to reach, what is the impact, what is my confidence, and what is the effort involvement. It sounds similar to that. Look at the large upside.
Yeah, I haven't heard that, but yeah, it might be similar.
Now, as founders go towards building these unicorns, what do you see as you advise companies, top things that they miss that can help them grow faster? So one was this of focus, separating the great from the good and only working on things with large upside. What are some other things that founders miss you've seen?
Well, I mean, one thing is that it's really hard to know how you should delegate, essentially like how you should hire in some ways, what you should do. And I think what most advice is to people is you should delegate the things that you're not good at. So if you're really good at engineering and you're not good at sales, you should hire some really great salespeople and delegate that out and hire a CRO to complement yourself, et cetera. I generally think that's bad advice. So I generally think that, and again, this is the advice that probably 99% of people will give. So, if you use my advice as a grain of salt, so I'm going probably against conventional wisdom here, but I think you should hire and delegate the things you are good at first. So if you're really good at engineering, you should hire tons of great engineers, and you should delegate to those great engineers. Why? Because, well, first of all, if you're a great engineer, you're probably going to be a lot better at hiring great engineers than any other thing you could hire for. It's like, if you don't know that much about sales, it's very unlikely you're going to hire someone who's really good at sales. You're just not going to know how to do it. And so the first person you're going to hire in sales is not going to be great. Like imagine going the other way. If you're a good salesperson, you're like, I'm just going to walk into Starbucks and hire an engineer. Like it's not going to happen. Like you're not going to hire often a great engineer. So hire the things that you're really good at, and then slowly invest in yourself to get yourself better at the things that you're not great at, so that you can slowly delegate some of those things away. Now, if there's things you can automate, of course, automate those things. So you might be able to invest in an API or invest in software or other types of things. But I would focus most importantly on delegating things that you're really good at first.
I've never heard that one, because people always say fill your gaps, right? But delegate the things you're good at also makes sense, because you've learned to scale it, or you've learned to get it to a point of, let's say, product market fit. You're really good at it. It's working. Find somebody to take it over so you can find the highest leverage, the next highest leverage thing for you, or a high leverage thing for you as a founder. That's great advice.
That's right. And by the way, like, your company doesn't have to be great at everything. If you think of like some of the most successful companies, like, they still have glaring weaknesses. So if you think of like Salesforce.com, like, it's amazing at marketing. Why is it amazing at marketing? Because the CEO was already amazing at marketing before he even started the company. He was like, that's what he did. He knew how to market. What is it not good at? It's terrible at UI. It's like the worst UI company you can imagine. It's never been good at UI. It wasn't good at UI when it started. It's still not good at UI. It still probably will never get good at UI. And it doesn't matter. It's a great company. If you look at Google, like, there's things that they're just amazing at. There's things that they're not so good at. Even the best companies in the world have tons of glaring weaknesses. It's okay to not be a balanced company.
Definitely. And if you're trying to be great at everything, it's hard to be great at anything sometimes.
Correct.
and yes, Salesforce has bad UI, but sometimes bad UI, by virtue of bad UI, you can also be a very sticky product if you're collecting everyone's data.
True. Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing company. So even though all of us probably hate using it, it's an amazing company.
Now, we talked a little bit about hiring and delegating and finding people, but how do you navigate challenges in hiring in 2022 when so many well-funded startups, so much money going into the space, there's so much competition? What are some hacks, tips you've picked up for recruiting and that is relevant to this environment?
Well, recruiting is always hard. It's always hard. It's hard in the good times. It's hard in bad times. In the good times, it's hard because there's lots of competition for people. In the bad times, it's hard because when things are going bad, people often tend to flee to quality. So they're going to flee away from startups, and they're going to join, General Electric or something like that, because they're going to want something that has a little bit more safety in times that are bad. So it is always hard for startups to hire. And it's always hard to find super talented people. And what you want to be able to do is, ideally, you want to have a sense of the world. You want to have a sense of the type of person that you think other companies are undervaluing. There are certain types of engineers that everybody values super highly, everybody. So you can get them to join your company, but you're going to have to somehow convince them why what you're doing is just so much better than everything else. There are other types of engineers that are that you might be able to value higher than other people. And you may have some sort of heuristic about why this person should be. It's just, again, it's the money balling for talent. And you want to be able to find a higher value in somebody than your competitors, which are thousands of other companies trying to hire these same people that have.
Certainly. And tied to that, as you grow from your C to Series A to B and beyond, who are the key hires you make at each of those stages? And sometimes as you grow from A to B to C, you also need different types of people, right? So what is the order of people you bring in, and how do you effectively transition them if they're not leveling up to the next phase?
Well, I think this is an extremely difficult thing, and nobody's done it well. So it's very hard. Even at Facebook, I think something like 21 or 22 of the first 25 people left within 3 years in the company, in that, one of the most successful companies of all time. So it is very difficult to manage talent, to grow your talent, et cetera. The one thing is if you happen to hire a 10Xer, do everything possible to make sure that they stay in your company. It is probably pretty rare that you're going to hire a 10Xer. They're not going to come around that often. And you often won't know until after they've worked with you for 3 to 6 months that they are a 10Xer. But once you know that, you have to make sure that they stay. And how do you make somebody stay in your company? Usually most 10Xers, what are they optimizing for? They're optimizing for growth. So you have to make sure that they're continuing to grow and continuing to do, continuing to do really interesting things, which means you may not, you want to be promoting them maybe faster than their resume suggests that they should be promoting them. You want to give them more responsibility faster than maybe their resume suggests. You want them to continue to feel like they're growing. And you don't want them to leave. And, we just, especially they may go start their own company or whatever. You want to keep them in your company as long as possible. And the only way to do that is by making sure they're growing super, super fast.
Certainly. And there's a lot being said about this concept of 10Xer. What is a 10Xer? What are the key traits of a 10Xer?
Well, there's a few core traits, I think, of all 10Xers. So I think really smart people are very good at identifying problems, and then really, really, really good people are good at identifying problems and fixing problems. 10Xers are a little bit on the opposite side. So they're really good at identifying opportunities and taking advantage of opportunities. And often problems have like a 1X downside, whereas an opportunity may have, a 1,000X upside or something. So these are extremely rare birds that are still smart, because smart people like to identify problems and stuff. But they're really looking for the opportunities. They're usually quite positive people. So they're not just themselves amazing, but they're making everyone else around them really good. And it's hard to do that with negative energy. So they're generally relatively positive people. They don't have to be like the biggest cheerleader in the world, but they definitely have to be like somewhere on this side on the positive train, because they've got to get everyone else around them kind of like moving forward. They're also pushing you. They're pushing you as the founder, as the CEO, and they're pushing everybody else in the company to move faster, to do more, etc. You're not pushing them, they're pushing you. And I would say, a lot of great people, you're still pushing them, you're following up with them, etc. The 10Xer is like calling you as the CEO up and like, hey, we got to move faster. We got to do this. Here's this idea. I got to push it. You almost have to rein them in rather than them trying to rein you in.
I love that. High trajectory people are like, you just got to give them room to go. And if you attach it to them, they're going to shatter the glasses and take you along with them. I like this framework here. Good people are good at identifying problems and telling you the solutions, and 10Xers bring opportunities and push everyone around them and keep the energy high.
By the way, sometimes they don't know that they're a 10Xer. And so you almost have to let them know that they're special. We hired this person named Annika Gupta right out of college when I was at LiveRamp. We hired her as an engineer. She was a computer science major at Stanford, and we hired her, and she joined our company as an engineer, and she was a really good engineer. And then we moved her into product, and she turned out to be really good product. And then, a couple of years into her job, we said, hey, you're running marketing. And she's like, well, I don't know anything about marketing. I don't think I'm qualified. I don't think I could run it. And we're like, join the club. Nobody at our company knows anything about marketing, but you're now in charge of it. And she did just an incredible job. Then she went on to run product. Then she ran on to run all of product and all of engineering, and managed like maybe 1,000 people in the company. And so she just has this incredible trajectory, and you just have to remind them that they're really special people. And I think, probably deep down, she knew she was super smart and super special person, but it's always helpful to let them know, like, hey, no, you're a special person, and we're doing something with you that is not the norm. We're doing something that's above and beyond what we do with other folks at our company.
Yeah, it's important to appreciate proactively and reward proactively, because if you wait, it's probably already too late with a 10X.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
If you wait for them to ask for a raise or more equity or more opportunity, it's probably already late because others are hitting them up too. That's some great advice. Couple last questions. We're at the top of the hour here. As a CEO, what goals you think and KPI should CEOs set for themselves and the company? And how do you communicate that to the organization so they're trained to make better decisions when you're not in the room?
Well, the most important thing that the CEO can do beyond just making sure the company is funded and stuff is just having a clarity that everybody in the company should know what the company does and understand the company strategy. Because ideally, everybody you want to push the decisions down to the lowest level a decision can be made on. You don't want every decision having to come all the way back to the CEO. So ideally, the only decisions that are coming to the CEO are the most important decisions that need to be made. because your time is very, very valuable. And you ideally, like whether it's an individual contributor, whether it's an engineer or a salesperson or a customer success person or product person or a marketing person, whatever, you want them to be able to make very, very good decisions. And the only way they could do that is if the strategy is very, very clear.
Definitely. That is fantastic advice. Focus on the most highest leverage things for yourself as a CEO, as a founder, any department leader for that matter. What is highest leverage for you? Now, as you look back on your journey, what was the toughest, lowest point of your journey and how did you navigate it?
Well, that's a good question. I think even when things are going well, there's always going to be something that's not going well. And it's something that's just like very hard for people to understand who haven't been CEOs before, is that there's always huge problems going on in every single organization that the CEO is dealing with. It's like the company just had 6 monster quarters in a row. You just brought in like the most amazing customers. You acquired your competitor. You raised $100 million. You did all these things. And then you've got this revolt over in one of your departments and you have 3 of your top people who are threatening to leave for some random reason or something. Like there's always going to be something going on in the company that most people in the company don't know of that is a problem. And it's always hard. And the CEO, this is why so much is riding on the CEO's shoulders. It is a very, very, very hard job. It is very hard to empathize if you haven't been in that seat before, because you're just always dealing, even when the best things are happening, you're always dealing with a lot of difficult things. And by the way, Certainly. It's good to know, because if you think you're dealing with this stuff and other people aren't, it's very helpful to know that everyone is dealing with like massive problems. Now they're dealing with their own problems, so they're not dealing with the same problems you are, right? It's the famous quote, all happy families are alike and all unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. So they're certainly dealing with their own things, but they're dealing with something right now. You can name any great CEO, Tim Cook, whoever, and they are dealing with a crap ball problem right now that they wish they weren't dealing with.
Definitely. Now, any other unconventional advice founders typically ignore but shouldn't?
Well, I would say the other thing, I don't know if this is a founder thing, but I think the thing that most smart people do wrong is that they overvalue optionality. And I think the smarter you are, the more people think optionality is important. I think this is the reason why a lot of people go get like an MBA for, gives them a lot of options to go do lots of things. They go get their ticket punched somewhere. Are you going to go do this thing to go get my ticket punched? They're going to join a consulting firm. It's a reason why a lot of people in the US go to law school, not because they love the law, but because, it gives them optionality to go do things. I think almost always doing something for optionality's sake is almost always a very bad call. And essentially what my optionality is I'm going to do something I don't really like to do necessarily in the short term, and I'm going to optimize for later term. And you think you're optimizing for the long term, but you're actually just optimizing for the midterm. And so you're sacrificing the short term, you're actually really sacrificing the long term, and you're doing everything to do some sort of midterm optimization. I think instead you should kind of invert it, where you should be doing things that are really good in the short term, where you're learning a lot, you're working with great people, you're excited, you want to be able to do that thing. It's really cool. You might actually be not optimizing for the midterm, but that long-term actually arc is probably something, that's really good. So instead of going to law school, maybe join the Peace Corps, or, there's all these different things that you could be doing that I think have a better long-term optimization.
Focus on the impact long-term. I love it. So any books that have shaped your career that you recommend, or that's on your shelf that you're reading right now that you recommend to founders?
I think 0 to 1 is one of the most important books you could read as a founder. It's a book by Peter Thiel, and it just has a really good framework on how to read. It's also a very short book, so it's a great book. And then if you want a book that's a little bit softer, I love the book Difficult Conversations. Really what they do is they go through a lot of difficult conversations, whether you're one you could have with your spouse or your best friend or your parents or, job or, a partner or asking for a raise or all these different things. And they kind of walk through different ways of having that conversation in a more productive way.
Love it. Love it. Where are you active on social? LinkedIn, Twitter, where can we follow you?
I freaking love Twitter. I love Twitter. Probably shouldn't love it so much, but it's I'm at Auren, Auren on Twitter. So I would love, and if anyone wants to ask me a question over Twitter or anything like that, I know there were a lot of questions in the chat we didn't get to. If you ask me a question on Twitter, I will respond to you with an answer. Don't DM me, just ask me public, and I'll respond for the public.
That is amazing. I'm actually not as active on Twitter. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So I'm going to follow your LinkedIn, Twitter, and pick up some hacks on building an audience there. Thank you so much for joining us, Auren. Lots of advice here. I learned a ton. Love and peace. Wishing you great success, my friend.
Love and peace. This was great.
I need some traction.